my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. It is Thursday, so it means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. And man, I'll be flying solo on today's show because I just want to dive into, the midterm elections and the shit show that it's been for a number of reasons. An ongoing shit show, I should say, because it's not over yet. Votes are still being counted as of the time of this recording. So, man, we're going to talk all about that. The red wave that never actually happened. Man, the Senate being up for grabs and between a really just a MAGA candidate. You can't put it any other way. Somehow, some way, people are coming out for this man. So now we have to have a runoff in Georgia. We'll talk about that. Heartbreaking in Texas, in Uvalde specifically, where we had the horrific elementary school massacre, and the way they voted is a really scary sign of the world that we live in. We'll get into all of that. In Ohio, once again, people are not voting for their best interests. We'll get into all that. They're drinking the MAGA Kool-Aid. And we'll talk about the Latino vote, right? There's always much made about how we vote as a community and how certain parts of the country lean one way, others lean another. We'll get into that. And on a positive side of things, man, leading off of the elections, we'll talk about some really important people getting reelected, and we'll also talk a bit about this new Black Panther movie, which has some really incredible Latin representation that I think y'all are gonna be really excited about. I'm not even a comic book guy, and I'm genuinely excited to see this movie because of this representation. So we'll get into all that, man. Let's just do it, man. Let's get into this nonsense from these elections. We'll do it in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, so let's start with this whole red wave that was supposed to be happening, or some were calling it this red tsunami, right? And they're basically claiming Republicans were just going to crush it on a national level, taking all of these seats away and getting elected into all of these positions, and the Democrats would be scrambling and they'd all be out of office. And Joe Rogan was pumping this up. Fox News, of course, Ben Shapiro. Well, there's going to be a wave. There's going to be a red tsunami, actually. It's going to be like end of days. And it actually didn't happen. Much to the surprise of the Trumpers who are in my comments on TikTok, claiming this red wave, it didn't happen. Did the Republicans take some seats from the Democrats? Of course. And as of right now, it actually looks like the Republicans are probably going to take the House back. I mean, it's technically still too close to call, but that's what people are predicting. So Republicans did do some damage, as to be expected, but they didn't dominate in the way they were claiming, and a shocker for anybody following along at home, the Republicans were overselling their point of view, and then, have to now scramble to find excuses as to why it didn't happen come election day, right? And many people are talking about how they downplayed the importance of abortion. You think you guys want to take away a woman's right to choose? How did you think that was going to pan out for the rest of the country, who has been pretty much on board with this since Roe v. Wade, right? Now, it's just scary, though. Even though this whole red wave didn't happen, and hopefully it looks like that crazy person in Colorado, Lauren Boebert, who went from a restaurant owner whose waitresses wore guns on their hip to a QAnon conspiracist who's somehow an elected official. So it looks like she may be ousted of office. It's still close as of right now, but she is losing currently. And she was one of the ones promoting this whole red wave that was supposed to happen. Check out my TikTok at DJ Dramos if you want some comedy at the expense of the Republicans. But moving on from that whole red wave thing, I mean, the Senate is still up for grabs, and many are thinking it's going to come down to probably a runoff in Georgia, which is going to be happening with Raphael Warnock, who is currently in office, and the challenger, Herschel Walker. Yes, former football star Herschel Walker. Yes, someone who has a problem stringing sentences together, yet somehow, some way is in an extremely close race with Raphael Warnock. Again, MAGA people, what are we doing here? I don't get it. And listen, I've been thinking about this a lot. I want to have far more empathy. Like, I don't want to be one of these people who just continuously shits on anybody who votes Republican. I don't want to be that person. Is it fun? Yes. You guys make it incredibly easy. But truthfully, I feel like it's a bit beneath me to take that position, right? And listen, I still do it. I'm still a work in progress. But I want to be able to have civilized conversations. I don't think everybody has to be a Democrat. Everybody has to be a progressive. But everybody does have to live in the real world, right? And that, to me, is kind of this line right now. Like, in the real world, anybody with half a brain can see that someone like Herschel Walker is not fit for office. I mean, even if you are a hardcore Republican, you don't believe in abortion, all of the above, the man has had credible accusations against him of having had multiple abortions. So this guy, aside from not having the political resume to represent a gigantic state like Georgia, aside from not having what seems to be normal intelligence of a human being, let alone somebody who's going to be an elected official of a giant state like Georgia, he also very obviously doesn't share the same principles that you do, right? The only thing that you guys share is the fact that you're both Republican. And it's the same thing with Trump. If you are a strict Christian and evangelist, you are a conservative, you believe in God and all of these things, how is Trump, your hero? A man who's paying porn stars allegedly for sex, a man who is committing adultery at that point because he's a married man, right? A man who has a reputation as a playboy, a con artist, like all of the above, again, doesn't fit the lifestyle that you are claiming that you want, right? So again, you're just voting blindly because it's Republican, and you're blindly allowing yourself to believe the lies. And again, that's why we can't really have this conversation. And I want to have that empathy. I want to be able to talk to people. But if your logic is not based on anything rational, if it's not based on the real world, there's not much of a conversation for us to have. And it's far easier for me to just point out how idiotic you are trying to prove certain points. And again, I don't have a problem with Republicans. I grew up, with one of my grandfathers being a Republican. And while I didn't agree with his, arguments oftentimes, there still was a conversation to be had. Him and my father would debate all the time, but it was conversations based around real topics, real policies, real arguments, not, whether or not Hillary Clinton is a lizard who also somehow runs a child sex trafficking ring underneath a pizza shop in Washington, D.C. somewhere, right? Like, those are the things that the modern day Republican Party is pushing. Not believing in actual election results, but yet claiming that they believe in democracy, while in the same breath wanting to hang the vice president for not committing treason and not honoring a credible election. Like, none of it adds up. None of it makes sense. That's why we can't have a conversation, right? And in Georgia, it's a scary thing to think that there are enough people willing to take that stance of not living in the real world and thinking that someone like Herschel Walker is fit to serve office, to the point that it's now so close they have to have a second election, right? And also, a place like Texas is another great example of this, like, really just hardcore commitment to idiocracy, right? There's no other way around it. You have Texas, right? A place that has had a lot of issues when it comes to gun violence. I mean, we all remember the massacre in Walmart, most recently in Uvalde, Texas, the elementary school. And ironically, in that same county that experienced this elementary school massacre, they still voted for Governor Greg Abbott to have another term. Like, this is a man who has taken zero action to try to remedy this horrific situation and more so prevent another one from happening. He still has no problem with guns being out there on the streets with semi-automatic rifles, AR-15s, like the ones that are the tool of choice, sadly, for these mass shooters. He supports it. He supports the NRA even after these horrific shootings happening right there in his own front yard. And what's worse is that people still got out there and voted for this man. And you had a great option in Beto O'Rourke, who has been somebody, in my opinion, who has actually done what I'm striving to do and actually try and sit there and have a conversation with the other side and listen to their crazy, right? And somebody who really seemed genuinely passionate about the issues facing Texas, and specifically these gun violence issues. It seemed like it really affected him, especially as a native Texan. Yet you still went with the person who really has shown a huge lack of empathy for this issue, and has actually just continued to be in the pocket of the very people who are causing this havoc in this country, the NRA, who are pushing the idea of guns in this country, right? And it's just incredibly sad to see once again that people are choosing their political affiliation, their MAGA obsession over their own well-being, right? And that's the idiocracy. That's the part that I can't look past. That's what I can't help myself from pointing out, the hypocrisy and just wanting to roast these people, because you're literally voting against your own best interest at that point, right? Again, I understand if you were a lifelong Republican, but this is not the Republican Party of your father, right? This is not, rooted in any sort of logic. These are just crazy people parading around as politicians. And that's what we have to get our mind around. Like, it's bigger than Democrat or Republican. Like, listen, the Democrats do a lot of stupid shit that I don't agree with. I call them out in here all the time. I think the Democrats are full of shit, just like the Republicans for the most part. They just don't live in the world of crazy. And that's sadly a really low bar, but that's where we are as a country, where I have to choose between the party that, might be smiling in my face, but, will probably stab me in the back, but at least they live in the real world and believe real things, versus the party that just believes in fantasies and nothing is real and everything is a conspiracy. They're not giving me much of a choice there. And quite frankly, in years past, prior to this whole Trumpism, I was open to voting for a Republican candidate if they were the right one, and sadly, that's not even an option these days. I have to vote for a Democratic candidate and do the very thing I'm condemning Republicans on, which is voting along party lines blindly, because the potential outcome of having a Republican in the presidential seat, or Republicans really just having control of this country, that potential outcome is incredibly scary for the livelihood of myself and my family and our future generations, right? And it's sad that I have to make that distinction, and I don't really have much of a choice. And it's got to be incredibly sad for anybody who has been affected by something like the massacre that happened in Uvalde. I mean, you have some of the families of the Uvalde victims speaking out following Abbott's reelection, and this is including a tweet that's been going viral from Kimberly Mata Rubio. And she's the mother of a 10-year-old victim, Alexandria Ania Rubio, who was killed in this horrific massacre. And she says, quote, "I wanted to send a message, but instead, the state of Texas sent me a message. My daughter's murder wasn't enough. Just know you fucked with the wrong mom. It doesn't end tonight. I'll fight until I have nothing left to give. Lexi's legacy will be changed." And I have chills reading that statement, because it has to be the ultimate slap in the face. Your daughter was brutally murdered for no reason while just going about her life as an elementary school student. And that wasn't enough for people to say, we need to change. And I've asked this question a lot on the show, on my various platforms. When will enough be enough? And I think elections like this one, in this county specifically, it points to the idea that maybe we are, as a culture, as a society, too far gone, too damaged to make sense of life and to pull ourselves out of this dark period. And I try to be the ultimate optimist, but fuck, man, these MAGA people make it incredibly difficult. And look at Ohio, right? This is the last example I'll give you when it comes to people sort of just voting against their own interest, right? Like, Ohio as a state has an opioid problem, right? And it's actually to the point that 2 counties in Ohio were awarded over $600 million from pharmacies after a lawsuit, right? They sued the pharmacies and won. Now, with that in mind, Ohio, as a majority, the citizens of Ohio, still went out and voted for the billionaire-backed J.D. Vance, who actually worked for a law firm that lobbied for Purdue Pharma, who's actually the maker of OxyContin, which is an opioid. And on top of that, Vance then hired an American Enterprise Institute resident who cited Purdue-funded studies to downplay the role overprescribing painkillers plays in the opioid crisis as the addiction specialist to Ohio's Appalachian region for his nonprofit Our Ohio Renewal. Let me break that down. This clown, J.D. Vance, has a quote-unquote nonprofit called Our Ohio Renewal. And what did he do? He hired somebody who then used the studies funded by Purdue Pharma, who once again make OxyContin. They went out and funded studies about the overprescribing of painkillers, right? And their intention was to downplay this, of course, because they want to downplay their contribution to this opioid problem, this opioid crisis. So this clown claims he has a nonprofit that is all about our Ohio Renewal, right? And he's fighting against this addiction problem. And he's not really, though. He's purposely hiring people who are going to pretend like they're doing something, but in reality are doing the devil's work, right? In reality are just pushing Big Pharma's agenda of selling more pills in a place where there is an opioid problem, in a state where there is an opioid problem. And once again, it's not like you didn't have a great candidate on the other side. It's not like you didn't have somebody publicly calling out J.D. Vance on his hypocrisy and how he's literally destroying Ohio and how he's literally exploiting the very people who are suffering. Tim Ryan is an amazing candidate, somebody who expresses a lot of compassion and actually called out J.D. Vance on a public stage during debates, pointing out his affiliations to Big Pharma, pointing out his affiliations to billionaires in a mostly blue-collar state. Yet still, the love of MAGA was put out in front of your own needs and in front of the needs of the state of Ohio as a whole. We're recognizing that drugs, and specifically opioids, are a gigantic issue in Ohio, yet we want to elect a man to Senate who literally works alongside with the very company that has been supplying and overprescribing those very same opioids. Make it make sense. It's just MAGA. It's just America in 2022. And again, it's incredibly hard to be optimistic. And just a little caveat here. Guess who J.D. Vance blames for this opioid problem, this drug problem in Ohio? I'll give you a second to think about it. You have an answer? Yeah. Mexicans, right? He blames Mexicans crossing the border for the drug problem in Ohio. No, it couldn't be the giant pharma companies overprescribing, and the ones that are lining your pockets, right? No, it's the Mexicans. Of course it is. And MAGA right alongside that. Yep, it's these damn Mexicans, and there they go. That's how they vote. It's fucking scary, man. I want to be again the optimist, but holy shit, there are a lot of really fucked up people and a lot of just idiotic people in this country. Now let's deviate from white middle America for the most part, and let's talk about the Latino votes, right? Let's talk about our community. So Republicans have been going hard for trying to take some of the Latin vote away from the Democrats. If I'm not mistaken, Latinos in this country generally vote 2-1 Democrat, right? And actually, scarily, in Florida, this was actually successful, right? So you had Governor Ron DeSantis actually win heavily in Latino counties that no Republican candidate for governor or president had won in a generation, right? Now that's fucking scary. It was Miami-Dade that he ended up winning. And again, I want to have an open conversation, an open dialogue. Latinos who are voting for Republicans, why? What about the modern day Republican Party do you think speaks to your issues? And I think this is kind of, I'm going to go out on a limb here and talk about the effects of assimilation. And I talked about that in a recent episode, but it's like these Latinos in Florida, in the Miami area, are now, living the quote unquote American dream. And they've forgotten what it was like when their family had to come over here with nothing. And they're forgetting that they came over here because their country of origin was in turmoil. And they needed to get out and come to safety for a better shot at a life for their family. Yet somehow, some way, they don't want the same for modern immigrants from other Latin American countries. Again, man, that's that assimilation. That's that belief that you are now a part of elite white culture in this country. And as a member of that community, you now have to shun everyone else. Anybody else who's looking to do the same thing as you, no, sorry, you can't come now. We were the last ones. We were allowed to do it, but you can't. It just doesn't make any sense. These people don't see you as equals. You are simply a commodity that they need to win votes and to stay in office and gain power. Like, they don't give a fuck about you. It's very obvious in the way they speak about Latin people and the racism that happens. Yeah, y'all think that you somehow, are a part of their little white boys club, and it's just not real. It's not true. And luckily, this wasn't really a trend that we saw throughout the country. Republicans in other places didn't keep up the same pace as Ron DeSantis. Now, nationwide, Democrats won Latino voters 60% to the GOP's 39%, and this is according to exit polls that were conducted for CNN and other news networks by Edison Research. Now, there is a slight improvement for Republicans over 2020. They're saying the Democrats' strongest performance was among younger Latinos and women, while Republicans did better with men and older voters. Yes, this old generation is out of their fucking mind. I hate to be the one to point this out. And they literally are trying to ruin it for this next generation. Thank God for younger Latinos. Thank God for Latinas, for Latin women. You are forever our saviors, because we don't know what the fuck we're doing. It's very obvious. I mean, listen, sure, 60% Dems to almost 40% Republicans. Majority of our community is understanding what is best for their interest and for us as a whole. But man, almost 40%, that's still too large. And of course they did better with men and older voters. I already talked about this older generation, but men, toxic masculinity, machismo culture, all that feeds into this sort of fuck you attitude of the MAGA culture. And it's really just sad, because we're being played. Anybody from our community who supports someone like Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis, who is shipping migrants who are literally at the most vulnerable points of their entire lives, shipping them to random states with the promise of a better life, only to find nothing when they arrive, using them as political tactics for TV. You're backing that? Somebody who looks at people from your community, from your culture, as not even human enough to be treated with dignity and respect, yet instead views them as lesser than, and as a result, uses them as some sort of political pawn to get himself on TV? That's who you're backing? Scary fucking times. And as of the taping of this, we're still waiting for Arizona and Nevada results, and that's also where Republicans went hard to get the Latin vote. It's just really scary. And I don't mean to push my own political affiliation on anybody. I'm just giving it to you as a human being. I really would be calling it differently if there wasn't one party of crazy and a party of extremism. Like, I genuinely would. But there's a lot at stake right now. I'm not going to be one of these other people who's like, our democracy is at stake. I mean, listen, I don't want to say it, but it feels like that, right? It feels that way, because these fuckers are crazy and they're trying to overturn everything. They're trying to make America great again. And when the fuck was America great? Specifically, when was it great for people of color? So what time period are we going back to? Because sadly, as low as the bar has been, this is probably the best time to be a person of color in American history. So if we're going back to when America was quote unquote great, that is not a positive outlook for anybody who identifies as a person of color in this country, because shit was not good for us historically back in the day in America. So, man, scary, scary times. These elections didn't go as badly as they could have, as badly as some were predicting for Democrats, but it still shows you, man, there's so many fucking crazy people in this country. And they are doing everything they can to destroy it. Now, with that said, man, let's move on to something positive, especially from our community. For Amo Mi Gente segment. Mi gente. All right, so we need some fucking positive news right now. And I'm not even like a comic book person. I'm not a superhero person, a Marvel DC person. I've never seen the original of this movie, but reading about it got me excited and I genuinely want to check it out. I'm talking about the new Black Panther movie. And it actually is going beyond just celebrating Black culture, which it did an amazing job at. I know during my time at the Breakfast Club when that came out, it was just like a huge thing for the Black community to feel seen and represented. It was a beautiful thing to see the effect that it had on people of that community. Now, the amazing thing is it looks like they're extending that beyond just the Black community, and they actually have a Mayan-inspired underwater paradise called Talocan. And in this paradise, they actually have a Mexican actress. Yes, they casted properly. A Mexican actress named Mabel Cadena, who is playing Talocan's fierce second in command, Namora. Now, as per Entertainment Weekly, Talocan is a Mesoamerican civilization that brings in real elements from Mayan culture, bringing in historians, right? They actually got the experts. Wow, what a fucking thought. Get some experts. They brought in experts to inform that part of the movie. Now, the hidden world is set to incorporate jade and feather headdresses, and as Mexican actor Tenoch Huerta puts it, quote, that's what inclusion means. It's not just putting some brown-skinned people in front of the camera or giving them an important role. It's how you're creating the movie. Can I get an amen? Can I get a fucking amen? That's what we've all been having discussions. Again, not a superhero guy, but this is the conversation that we've been having. They think because you throw a person of color in a role that all of a sudden that's representation. And listen, to a degree, it is. But also giving them the ability to have a full-fledged character that truly represents the culture and is well thought out and well researched, that is real representation. That is what's beautiful. Now, getting back to the actress that plays the second in command here, Mabel Cadena, she told the outlet El País, quote, I was told that people of color don't look good. They aren't depicted that way, that they would never be superheroes, end quote. And for that reason, her landing that role, quote, represented facing all the things that she had heard as a child and turning them around for good, right? And talking about representation, she went on to say, quote, sometimes an image on a screen is much more powerful than describing certain things. And also remembers that she was constantly typecasted in Hollywood, right? And in roles such as playing a prostitute in the movie Asphalt Goddess made her wonder if she would only be offered a certain type of stereotypical part. She goes on to say, quote, it's not that they're bad roles, far from it, but they didn't give me other parts. And again, that's what we're talking about with this idea in Hollywood, right? Where certain people can only play certain roles, right? And that's what people of color, specifically Latinos, who are incredibly underrepresented in Hollywood, that's what we've been taught. If you look too ethnic, that means you can only play the part of a very specific character, right? And that's what we're all trying to move past when we have these conversations of representation in Hollywood. And I think this whole Black Panther movie is really opening up the world to the possibilities of what inclusion really looks like, right? And how to do it right at the end of the day. They did it right for the Black community, and now they're doing it right for the Latin community, specifically celebrating our Mexican brothers and sisters, celebrating their culture and bringing in historians, hiring actual Mexican actresses, doing it right. Truly not just throwing it in there because they want to get some Latinos to the movie theater, but actually taking the time to make sure that they are putting out there a product that properly represents the people that they are depicting. And that's all that we ask for. And lastly, when it comes to positivity, we also had all members of the quote-unquote squad reelected, right? The progressive squad in office, and that includes our queen, AOC, getting reelected. Now, there was some videos I saw on TikTok and random other places of like people actually protesting her and coming out to some of her rallies and going at her. And it's great to see that we're going to still have AOC in office because her voice is so incredibly needed, right? She speaks to a different generation, and she's somebody who's unafraid to use her voice to fight against the nonsense that we're seeing. And specifically as a Puerto Rican, she's one of the people who is making sure that Puerto Rico continues to be advocated for. Now, sadly, we haven't seen much change in that department, but we need somebody out there who's going to continue to fight for us and Latinos as a whole, including that whole conversation. So big congrats to AOC, the whole squad getting reelected. Some good news for us in this country. Now, with that said, man, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for Conclusion Stew.
All right, so I'm not going to run down all of those election results once again, but I want to just harp on the idea that you have people so blinded by the propaganda they've been fed from one side that they are literally voting against their own interest, right? It literally becomes like rooting for your favorite sports team. Have you ever been to a really like, tough rivalry game in sports, specifically something like football or like, Red Sox versus Yankees or whatever the equivalent might be for other cities? Like, you see the way people are fanatical about their teams. They literally get into fistfights. They're screaming at random strangers just because of the hat or shirt that they're wearing. Like, people get wild about the sports teams they're supporting. And that's what politics has become. We have become a society that is picking and choosing a side as if it's like this sports team that we're rooting for. And that's incredibly scary because unlike sports, which really doesn't matter or have much effect on our everyday lives, the people that we put in office affect our life every single day, like literally affect our lives, the lives of our children, the future generations, the world as a whole. This is not something that we just can pick a fucking side and then blindly follow them as they bring us fucking down into the darkest points of this country, right? It's not like a team that you're finding, some sort of like solace or that gives you credibility. Like, listen, I was there during the bad times when we were terrible. I'm a diehard fan. Okay, that's a great and respectable thing in the sports world. When it comes to politics, that is not something to brag about. To be so blind and in your faith to a particular side that you literally will allow them to do whatever the fuck they want, even if it means putting your own livelihood at risk. And that's what we're doing. That's the point that we're at in this country. Again, I hate to be overly pushing my point of view or my political affiliation. But again, this goes beyond that. This is right and wrong. This is democracy and whatever the fuck they're trying to do with the Republican Party, fascism, right? This is safety versus chaos, right? And the Democrats, again, I'm not sitting here preaching that they're the fucking answer to everything and they are God's gift to human beings and they have it all figured out. They don't. They've dropped the ball plenty of times. Joe Biden fucking sucks. I'm not a fan of Joe Biden. Like, he's done a few good things that he's tried doing, but I'm not a fan of him. I would hate to have to vote for him again, but you're leaving me no choice because the alternative is literally people who believe that anybody who disagrees with them is a fucking communist and wants to destroy this country. They believe that if their candidate doesn't win, the voting must have been fixed. It must have been rigged in some sort of way. They believe that Hillary Clinton is a lizard. They believe that John F. Kennedy Jr. is still alive and is going to be resurrected and somehow change political affiliation in somehow the moment that he was dead or not, whatever. It doesn't make sense. None of it makes any fucking sense. And that's where we live. The party who's, politicians at the end of the day who lie and tell us what we want to hear versus the ones who are lying in the most extreme way humanly possible because they're not even basing anything off of reality anymore. And that's the world that we're living in. That's what's incredibly scary. And when you see results in places like Texas, specifically Uvalde, the county that Uvalde is in, and see them ignore the tragedy that happened right in their own front yard and just put the same person back in office who doesn't want to do shit about it, it's scary. It shows you the blind faith that they have towards the MAGA Republican Party. Ohio, a man who is working side by side with the company that is single-handedly responsible for creating much of the crisis that you face when it comes to opioids in your state. No, let's vote him in office. What? It doesn't make any sense. And Latinos, what the fuck are we doing who are voting almost 40% Republican? These people do not care about you. They've made it very clear. They view you as lesser than. They view Latin people as drug dealers and rapists. They denigrate your Mexican brothers and sisters. They tell you that nobody should be coming into this country for a better life, even though that's what this country was literally founded upon. What the fuck are we doing? That's what's scary to me. We are so blindly obsessed with a party that we don't care if they're destroying our lives as long as they win, because we want to own the libs, right? That's what they want to do. They want to stick it to the other side so hard that they're willing to destroy the country in the process. And that's what fucking scares me. Now, with that said, let's talk about Black Panther for a second. This is what inclusion looks like. Hiring experts for historical context to make sure you get it right. Casting people who are actually of the community, specifically if you are making a Mayan-inspired world, which is a huge part of Mexican culture. Hiring a Mexican actress to portray that. And on top of that, creating this world, this movie that centers around people of color, and not in a way that just has them in the movie and showcases the worst parts of a culture and your own stereotypes of it, but instead a movie that celebrates the beauty of these cultures, the Black and African lineage, the Latin community, specifically here we're talking about the Mexican heritage, celebrating that. That's what real inclusion looks like. And then also, shout out to the Queen, AOC, the rest of the squad for winning re-election. Much needed voices in a fucking crazy world that we are living in. Man, with that said, if you're in Georgia, please make sure you get out there when they have this runoff. Like, we cannot have Herschel fucking Walker as a senator in Georgia. It's just crazy. Let's just stop the nonsense already. And with that said, thank y'all for tuning in. Dramos.com for your merch. You want to book me for a speaking gig? I want to come to your school, your company. I want to come to your town, whatever it might be. All that info is on there. And please like, subscribe, comment, tell a friend, all that kind of stuff. Help us grow this show. This is all about us feeling included and seen. And that's what this platform is all about, man. So I appreciate y'all. All love and support has been amazing. At DJ Dramos if you want to connect. I've been hitting TikTok hard. Instagram, the DMs are always open. Been kind of crazy busy, so I apologize. I've been delayed on responding to some of y'all, but I'm promising you I'm going to try to get to that this week. And man, that said, have an amazing weekend. I'll catch y'all on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Until then, stay safe. Peace.